I'm Karaleigh Garrison, and this is Seeking Sunshine, where we find the positive in the trials of life. Why don't you join me? 'Cause I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. Oh, oh. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. I'm seeking sunshine. If you like this song, this is the acoustic version of Seeking Sunshine that is an exclusive just for my email list, which you can go get at careleighgarrison.com. Just hit subscribe, and then you will get an email that will send you to a place where you can go download the song and have it all for yourself for free. So go check that out. Are you looking for ways to support my podcast? If so, then please like it, subscribe it, and leave it a review. Did you know that if you leave a review, it helps my podcast get shown to more people? I would so appreciate it if you could leave some words in the review box and let people know. Share this with your friends and family and just tell them about the episodes that you really like and some of the takeaways that you've personally received and that have helped you out. Do you have a story to share? I would love to interview you for my podcast. I want to hear all about you and what you've been through and how you've been able to seek sunshine in your journey. Please reach out to me. You can send me a message in DMs on social media, or you can even send me an email at careleighgarrison@gmail.com. I would love to talk to you. Hello. Welcome back to the Seeking Sunshine podcast. Thank you for listening. I so appreciate your support. Thank you for all that you do. You are amazing. If you haven't heard that today, you're amazing. Just look at everything that you have been through and how you have just conquered it. So just think about that for a minute, because I know that there is someone out there who needs to hear this today. You're incredible. You're fantastic. Anyways, on to our incredible episode today. So today I have an interview with the amazing Lisa Tschudi. She is a mom to a special needs daughter, and she talks about what it's like to be a full-time unpaid caregiver with 24/7 always on call type support, and what that actually does to a person and how it is to live like that. And I really relate to her story because I have 3 kids with special needs, and I know so much of what that life is like and how difficult it is. So it was lovely to talk to her and to feel each other's support as we have both navigated this world. And I think it's just so important for this kind of information and this story to get out there, and for people who don't have to kind of deal with these things on a daily basis to have a better understanding of what it is like to live this life. So I'm so excited to share her story with you, and apologies, I'm trying so hard to record this in the snippets of time that I have in between things, and I am just about certain that you can hear my son upstairs screaming and throwing a fit. He's not very happy that I ducked down to the basement to try to record this in a little bit of silence. And that's just part of what it's like to have special needs kids. We don't really get much time to ourselves. And if we steal away for a moment, kind of all hell breaks loose. So that's a little bit of what's going on upstairs. He's stomping around and throwing a fit. So I'm going to finish this little intro and introduce the amazing Lisa and her whole story and let you get on to this great interview. Welcome to the Seeking Sunshine podcast, Lisa. I'm so happy to have you here. So as you know, this podcast is all about finding the positive in the trials of life, and you have certainly had your fair share of trials and struggles to get through. And so I was hoping that you would just tell us all about yourself and what you've been through, and how you've been able to seek sunshine.
Okay. Excuse me. I am the mother of 2 children, and the younger one has significant disabilities. So I was also a really young mother. Well, a young mother in today's standards, I suppose, in that I did not have I was in my 20s, but I did not have a stable home established, and neither my husband or I were advanced in a career
Oh,
and
and
that
I
sort of
was in
thing.
the same I was in the same kind of boat. Like I got married at 18 and had my first at 20 and my second at 21 and
Yes.
then my husband went and he became disabled, so like he had an okay job, but then he was so I've been there. Like I definitely feel that like today, like I'm one of the youngest moms that I know. A lot of people like don't start having kids today until their 30s, and then they're all like everything's like squared away. And so I definitely
Yeah.
feel you on the young motherhood and what that's like and how difficult it is to raise kids, especially special needs kids, when you're still kind of getting to know your spouse and you're not quite like totally together on the same page yet. Honestly, my husband and I, it took us like a decade before we really like gelled in our relationship. And by then, we had, our oldest was 8, right? So
It's
I
an ongoing
definitely,
process
yeah, it's a
for
whole
sure. 20 years
thing.
in, my husband and I are still working some things out. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I I had my kids in my early 20s, and one turned out to have a significant disability. And so at the same time as all of the ordinary parenting things were going on for me, as far as having very young children, we were moving frequently in order to each move had a little bit different reasoning behind it, but in order to find a place where we could follow my husband's career and afford a place to live. And we started out in the Bay Area, which is very, very high cost of living. And that just seemed really unattainable. And so it was intense from those perspectives. And then my daughter, when she was a little over a year, had her first seizure, which was a status event,
How scary.
turned blue in the face, was rushed to the hospital, and it took them about a half an hour to stop the seizure. And she was in a medically induced coma for a few days.
Oh no. How
And
was she, your first or your second?
she's my second,
She's your second.
my
Okay, so you
younger
had
one.
an older child and like I've
Yes.
I've been through those experiences where like a younger sibling has something traumatic happen and it's incredibly traumatic on the older sibling as well as like the parents. Like that adds a
Yeah.
whole extra layer to it that you wouldn't even like normally consider.
That is also for sure another aspect that complicates things. I think whenever there's multiple children, including one that has a disability, it does become a real one foot in the special needs world and one foot in the typical world, and a child who now has some additional needs emotionally, socially, around what their family and their sibling has been experiencing.
It's really interesting how it's kind of a base of trauma, and I can only say that because it's been our experience. Like watching my children grow up with special needs siblings. I mean, they all have autism, but to different degrees, and seeing how it affects them and how different events in our history, our family history, have like been traumatic for them, and it's so hard to watch that happen as a parent and just go like I was doing my best then and I'm still doing my best, and I can't change the fact that like my youngest almost died when he was born and how that affected and was traumatic for my other two kids. Like I can't change those things. You just have to like do your best and give your kids the best you can and not blame yourself. And it's
For
so
sure.
hard. And there's so many layers to being a special needs parent that I think people don't understand until you have to like live it.
For sure. For sure. And I think a lot of mm, seeking sunshine in these kind of situations is not even so much, for me, not even so much seeking sunshine as persistence in being willing to put one foot in front of the other, in front of the other, and seeking whatever it is I can do, whatever
It's seeking sunshine
whatever I
in
can
that
take care of, whatever little step.
you see a future that's different. It's seeking sunshine in that, like, there's hope there. There's like, I know that this is a situation worth fighting for. I know my kids are worth fighting for. I know that they have that value and I have that value and we as a family have that value, and that's where the sunshine is in just pushing forward because there's hope. There's the promise of a better tomorrow even though today is awful.
For sure, for sure. Um, yeah, I met a couple of families where the children were older than mine when mine were very young, and that gave me examples of how even when it seems really, really intense with the young children with the disabilities, they're going to grow up and things are going to change. And our access to resources is hopefully going to improve. And that's definitely was very helpful for me to start having those examples and ideas in my head that certainly life can be very positive again. Yeah.
Just like trying to find sunshine in in when life's really hard, and it's when you're in those moments, it can really,
Yeah.
it's really easy to feel stuck. It's
Yes.
really easy to feel like there is nothing's ever going to change. This is always going to be like this. And I felt like that so many times, especially with my son when he was completely nonverbal. And there was a point where I like completely gave up hope that he would ever talk. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, how much has he progressed? There's always progress. And sometimes we have to look really, really hard for those tiny little bits of progress and celebrate that. And sometimes they're really, really tiny. But they are
That's
always
very
worth celebrating.
that's very true. Very, very true. For us, and I think for me, um, I not only am looking at tiny steps, but I'm looking always at very, very small things I can do to change my
Yes, that's
life.
so important.
And it can be as simple as I don't care how much chaos is going on, I'm going to take 30 seconds to put on the music that I like, or turn off the music I don't want to hear that a family member was listening to, or
To care for yourself.
temperature or
That's
whatnot.
so, so important to take those little moments when they come, and sometimes you have to make them happen, but to care for your own mental health. Like there's no other way for special needs moms to get through it all. With like, you have to take that time out for yourself. You have to give your brain a break for even a second. Like
For
that
sure.
is so essential to like living day to day in this really, really high stress, highly vigilant kind of environment as a mom. You've got to take that time out for yourself, or you, the consequences aren't good, and we've got to be there for our kids, and so we have to be there for ourselves.
For me, for a very long time, it was very, very small things. It was very, very uh, the kinds of things I just mentioned. Okay, I am going to change some little thing in my environment to make myself just a little more comfortable while whatever it is still going to be happening. And over time, that does make a big difference. I think it's even reinforcing in my brain that I am worthy of being comfortable, that it's
Yes,
important for me to be comfortable, that I am stronger when I'm comfortable. And those kind of things are super important for sure.
it's so
Um,
so easy as a mom of, like, complex children, like to
put them above your own needs. And it
For sure.
seems really, really logical at first because you're like, their needs are greater than mine, and they are my everything, and I have to give everything to them. But the thing is, if you don't put yourself first, there won't be anything left for you to give to them. Like, it is, you have to make yourself the priority, or else you will physically not have the capacity to care for others.
I would say not even a priority, but on an equal level, that we're each a human being that has our own needs and wishes and likes and dislikes, and to maximize the entire family's getting their needs met, and with mom being one piece was how I looked at it or look at it. And I think that particularly uh, when there's those choices to be made, for example, there's two events happening at the same time, and one is what mom wants to do and one is what the kids are interested in. I think that even then there needs to be give and take. There needs to be, you evaluate, well, over the last month, what's the schedule look like? Is this the one time in the month that this family that mom's getting the choice, or is this, you know, time for the kid to have their choice?
That's
And
exactly what I was gonna say, is it's all about give and
yeah,
take. You just have
yeah,
to like recognize when you're only giving and you're
yes,
giving and giving and giving and giving and giving, and you have to make sure that you get a little bit in return,
for
get
sure,
enough in return, really.
for sure. Yeah, and I think some of those things are really, again, come back to being really, really simple and really, really starting tiny. And then from that point, you have certain habits. I do take my 5 minutes to get my tea. I do, mm, get up and address whatever it is in the environment that I want to address for more comfort. I do take that once a week event that I enjoy, that's for me, or uh, step away for 5 minutes if the baby's crying
Absolutely.
and that's what I need to do.
It's so
Mm,
funny. What always
and
worked for me, and this is always, I felt like so different and so like maybe even like crazy from just the rest of the world, is that I always get ready in the morning. Like
mhm,
throughout my kids when they were really little, we weren't sleeping through the night yet. Like I always took the time to like do my hair and makeup and get dressed. Like every single day, and it see like a lot of, it's easy to look at that and be like, oh, that's such like a vanity thing, but it's like my time. And like no matter what else happens through the day or through the week or whatever craziness is coming, like that is my time, and I do not compromise on that. Like that is my time, and I swear to you that that is one of the things that has like really kept me like above like sane throughout
that's
the
awesome.
whole like thing with my kids. Like you just have to know yourself and know what you need, and put some boundaries on, like, I'm getting my tea every day and I'm gonna spend these 5 minutes just sitting here and doing that because that is what I need. Like
Yeah.
it's so important to recognize what you need and give it to yourself.
Yeah. For me, if the audience could see the video, they would see that I'm not doing it quite the same way. For
Most people
me,
don't.
staying, for
Most people
me,
do not.
right. And it actually took me many years, till fairly recently, to even understand the importance of a morning routine. But for me, this morning, I started with reading a little more in my novel that I had been reading at night, just cozy in my big comfy chair here. And then I have a little very brief calisthenics yoga routine that I do.
That's awesome.
I did that. Then I picked a couple of strawberries that are still in my garden. Then I let my dog out. So these things that are comforting and soothing for me, and as far as getting dressed and makeup, hair, any of that, for me, I feel best. Like, okay,
you
I'm gonna
are, and
comb
that's
through my hair. That's
fabulous.
enough.
Like that's
And other people are different. Like, it's
Yeah.
awesome the way
Well,
you are.
and
Yeah,
like I was saying,
yeah,
like most people do not like do
yeah.
this. Like most
And
people
I,
find this a little bit crazy. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna accept my weirdness and be okay with it. Because it's like most people just want to like, go out in their pajamas and like with a scrunchie in their hair and be like, whatever, like this is fine. And it's like, that's amazing. Go
yeah,
and do the thing that makes you feel the best. And if it's gonna be a little weird like me, like just embrace it. Like do yoga, do meditation, do the thing that works for you. Just make sure that you do the thing that works for you.
yes, yeah.
You
And we
can't
all,
do anything that works for somebody else because you're not them. You have to be you and embrace it.
yeah, and you're looking awesome. And that's that's I appreciate people that do like to do that kind of the hair, the makeup, the prettier clothes. And for me and my body and myself and my spirit, it feels better to like give myself the messages that I can be comfortable, that I am with my family and people that already care about me. I don't need to be putting on a certain presentation. And actually, that's some of the advantages to the job of being a full-time caregiver are the kinds of freedoms you have like that it's not going into an office where there's a certain dress code or a certain image people are looking for. If you want to,
Way to look for sunshine.
if you,
A
that's
blessing. A blessing of being a full-time caretaker. You can just wear whatever you want. That's a great perspective.
for sure. And if it's beautiful, full face of makeup and hair is perfect and clothes are, name brand, fancy, totally fitted, beautiful clothes, that's awesome. If it's, I love my t-shirt or my pajamas and I barely ran a comb through my hair, like that's awesome.
Go for it. Yes.
um, so I think that there's a freedom that I certainly experienced throughout my experiences raising my child that has a disability and being the full-time caregiver for sure. And not only can I wear what I want, if I feel like going to socialize, I can probably find some other moms with their kids or some event that my daughter could go along to. Yes and no. That gets tricky sometimes, but it also can be possible. I can go if it's a beautiful sunny day, I can go outside for the walk and take my daughter out for a walk. If it's if I am really low energy, we're sitting at home and she's having extra screen time.
What you're saying is
That's
there's freedom to it, and it's
right,
beautiful.
right.
That's a beautiful, like, it's such a, like, it's easy to look at being a caretaker and be like, oh my goodness, you're just giving, giving, giving. That's so draining. But to be able to take a different perspective and be like, this is freeing. There's a lot of freedom in this, like, calling that you have. It's so beautiful. It's a fabulous way to look at it.
Right. And not that it isn't a lot of responsibilities too, and there aren't a lot of times where, okay, when my daughter might have been in the hospital or something, I got to be in the hospital with her, right? Or attending the doctor's appointments and the so forth. And that's not fun. And at the same time, most of my experience anyway was definitely I had freedom of location. I had freedom of control over my environment in a lot of ways. I've had control over the timing of and pacing of when I do things and how I do things. And I didn't have to be in an environment of being micromanaged or having to participate in any particular social scene I didn't want to.
That's
Anything like
awesome.
that.
So tell us
Yeah.
about like what were those early years like as a mom, and how have you progressed? How has your family progressed and all the moving and stuff that you guys did?
Yeah. The first I would say 10 years of my second daughter's life were very, very intense for us, for sure. We were not only coming to grips with her having disabilities and pursuing a lot of medical care for her, we ended up having her prescribed the ketogenic diet, which, when it's a true ketogenic diet, means that every single meal is planned out and measured out to the gram. And it's very time intensive, and you're definitely reading all of the nutritional labels on any food. You have to stick with the same brand every time or recalculate your meal plan.
Well,
You
and the
have
whole
to
thing's like
really
really,
watch that
really
all.
labor intensive because most like prepackaged things are just no go. Like it's
Sure,
mostly just making everything from scratch.
sure. It took off the table the idea of going through the drive-through to pick up anything, right? It's it took off the table the idea of the prepackaged heat and eat meals for sure, and all of that kind of stuff.
Which I have to
So
say, as a young mom, like like I know those things are not super healthy, but sometimes it's like, okay, sanity saver. And when you don't have that sanity saver, like when that's not an option, oh,
it could be intense. It could be um, just really exhausting, and the nonstop nature of this. That this is there's never anyone else who was going to prepare the meals for me. There's never any time I can take a break and not give them to her. Right? Of course, she has to eat, and that so as we had her on the ketogenic diet, which also, along with the meal preparation, then there's a whole bunch of supplements that go along with it that we have to make sure that we're giving her. There's a whole bunch of doctor's visits and lab works that we would do on a regular basis. Then she was in PT and speech therapy, and we had IEPs for school. You know how this goes. You get really immersed in this
well, and there's
special
so
needs
many of
world.
them. There's like, okay, PT and OT and speech, and then early intervention, and there's just like so many, and coordinating all of that as a mom is another huge layer of work. Like all
For
the
sure.
appointments and making sure just the secretarial nature of being a mom can be really extreme and really overwhelming sometimes.
For sure. There was so much administration that way, for sure. And all of these things have layers and layers and layers of administration to them in the world that we live in right now. There is complexity to it's not just make the phone call and schedule the appointment, it's check with the insurance, is this covered, and ask all the questions, and then go back to the doctor's office, and they might be telling you something different from the insurance company, and you go back and forth to
Well, I
figure
hate
it
that
out.
so
And then
much.
there's
Well, and like don't
and
even get me started on the meds. At one point, like a year ago, my between my three kids, they were on 11 or 12 different medications. And then they
right.
all got sick, and then it added antibiotics like four times a day, and then it was like over 20, and I was like, this is insane. Like, how do you keep track of all of these things?
It's you need to start to learn how to implement systems to make this all work, right? And that's one of the things that happened for me over time that I think people don't appreciate from women like us, is that by necessity we're learning systems thinking, we're learning to be managers. This
You
is a
have to
managerial
be
job.
you have to be organized or it will all crumble, and there could be like super devastating consequences to not being super duper organized.
Right. Your child could get really sick again, right? And it's definitely by a necessity in trial by fire sort of situation for sure. And
I feel
so
like you we just get like I knew I wanted to have a kid. I knew I wanted to get pregnant, but I certainly didn't like sign up for all of this. I never wanted to be a doctor. I never wanted to be a nurse. Like that was never something I wanted to do. And it's like, okay, well here you go. You get to do that anyway. Like
for
there
sure,
you go. We're just gonna hand it to you, and like it's this feeling of like they talk about that feeling of like new mothers being handed a newborn, and they're like, what do I do with this? And it's like that, but times a bajillion when they're like, okay, here's this crazy diagnosis. Here's all the things you have to do to keep your kid alive now, and you're like, but shouldn't someone shouldn't somebody like more responsible, more adult, maybe than me have these responsibilities? Like, I don't know if I'm ready for this or not.
yeah, like is there somebody who knows what they're doing with this
An
that I could have
adultier
access to,
adult.
please? Yeah. And the access that you have to the people who presumably know what they're doing, the doctors and the nurses and so forth that are professionals,
And then you
is
find
so
out that they don't
minimal.
really know what they're doing.
Sometimes they don't.
Uh, well,
Sometimes they
it's
don't. I
and
have
just
stories
because
along those
like
lines.
just because every child, every person is so unique and individual that
Mm,
nobody can really know entirely what they're doing with each individual until you've like lived with them, you know?
for sure. And that's a way we really do become the experts. So we become not only good managers in general, but we really do become the experts on our children. And that's as far as over time for me in my life, how it's become more comfortable and more good is just based on that time that we've spent together, that I have come to understand my daughter so deeply and her quirks and her particular needs. And it's a real expertise, individual to individual,
They say it
that the
takes like what?
relationship you develop.
Like 10,000 hours or something like that to become an expert, and I'm like, yeah, we got that.
Yeah,
But yep, we got that times a few.
right, right. I've calculated that I've given my daughter about 3,000 baths in her lifetime, just bathing, just baths. And that's one small tip of the iceberg piece of things
Well,
that we've
and
done
that's
together.
A, that's a
Yeah,
lot of baths. And
yeah,
B, when you're bathing a special needs child, it's not a simple, oh, go hop in the tub, I'll help you wash. It's a fight like half the time, or maybe more than half the time. Like there's all these like complexities to a simple bath that makes it so not simple. They have to have the temperature this way. You can't get that wet. You have to do, they won't get their hair wet. You have to have this shampoo. Like there's just, yeah.
everything we do with the person with a disability can be extra complicated for sure. Yeah. Over time, those routines still develop and you still start to understand each other better. And the person with the disability does grow up and become used to certain things and have their ways that work for them. That does happen. And it's all definitely a lot more, just more complex than your average child growing up, for sure. So the other thing I was going to mention about learning managerial skills is also over time, I've really learned, particularly when it comes to those medical things, to pick and choose and prioritize more. I don't feel the need to try to do everything at once. It's uh in my daughter's case anyway, there are a lot of things like uh orthotic braces, PT, having a new wheelchair, or potentially speech therapy. We haven't done that in quite a while. All of these kinds of things that are not exactly life and death in this moment right now, right? Not urgent in that sense by any means. So you can definitely take your time and pick and choose and figure out where you see the most value for your loved one right now.
That's so funny because we went through
Um,
that I think a few years ago we were doing everything. We were doing
Right.
every therapy that we could find, and times three, well, I guess times two, because my youngest hadn't been diagnosed yet, but like every single therapy we could find, because I was like, I'm gonna do the best, and they're gonna grow the most, and it's gonna be all the things. And then there became a point when I was like, this is overwhelming, not just for me, but for them too. And you learn as a parent, like there comes a point when you're like, we can't do it all. We have to
Sure.
pick the one or the two or whatever that is most important, that's going to give us the most value, because this just can't keep going like this. And I think that every special needs parent reaches that point where they're like, oh, yeah, I can't. We can't. We just can't
Right.
do everything. There are too many things. And actually, you know what? That's just true of like everyone in
Right.
general. Like there
Right.
is so much out there that is good and that we can learn from, but we literally do not have time to do everything.
Right.
We have to choose for ourselves what's going to be the best for us right now. And when you're a caretaker, it's observing your child and going, okay, I'm noticing that they are feeling overwhelmed. And like you kind of have to like make some of those choices for them. You have to be really, really observant and really like know them so well so that you can see when things need to change and when things are too much.
For sure. For sure. For sure. And also being able to participate in ordinary life is super, super important. And I realized looking back that some of the things that were most beneficial to my daughter were not the physical therapy and the speech therapy and the yada, yada, yada. Those had their value at certain times and places. And really, she gained as much or more sometimes from things like when we lived near a beach, having her out and assisting her to walk on the warm sand. Um, and experience have that experience seem to make as much or more difference. When I lobbied for her to come to move schools and come to our home district, and in a situation where she was integrated more than she had been with the general population in the school, her language took off, actually. Just by I I really believe the better exposure to ordinary conversation around her.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, and I think that for sure those regular experiences have a lot of value. If your child's at all interested in playing a sport or an instrument or doing certain kinds of artworks, those can be really, really amazing avenues to work on what would be therapy goals in a way that the kid's much more engaged. One of the other things that was really awesome for my daughter was therapeutic horseback riding, which,
Yes, I've always wanted to do that.
yeah, is really amazing. In our case, we found a program that was designed as a therapeutic model for people with disabilities, and really, uh, it was an incredible opportunity to have a fun, exciting thing to come look forward to every week that was totally challenging her balance and totally strengthening her physically. And the horses were amazing because you can see them adjust themselves to different riders and give really exactly the challenge that rider needs. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
So
That's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
So, um, tell me about like experiences you guys had as a family. I know you guys had a pretty crazy experience with your house. How was all that, especially like with having your kids and special needs? Like I know that any traumatic event is going to be crazy for any family, but when you add in maybe somebody who doesn't quite understand as well, like that can just add another layer.
Yeah. So you're talking about us losing our home in the Alameda wildfire. here in Oregon about 2 years ago. So this was relatively recent, more so. When that happened for us, it was kind of just like, here we go again. Here we go again with like not knowing where we're going to be able to live and having to find a place and having to arrange a lot of little details around this. Talk about administrative work. Also, when you lose a house by fire, that's a year long at least full-time administrative job. Like that's in itself is a lot of phone calls to make and forms to fill out and all of that kind of work for sure. And so for us as a family, we're a very tight unit already, and we've been through all the things that we've been through before, and including moving often. And my daughter happens to be, I know a lot of times with people with disabilities, it can be a real huge challenge to have disruptions to routine or place or things they're familiar with. My daughter in particular is not that way. She's actually very flexible and very, very easygoing in that way. Maybe because we moved often when she was young too was part of
That's so great though. Like
it.
my son
Yeah.
is definitely like really, really rigid, and things change, and he just gets really, really anxious and like perseverates on it a lot. So it's really lovely that she didn't have such a major impact on her when this crazy life event happened.
Yeah. And I think part of it is us as a family unit of four being really tight with each other, and that we're still all physically well, we're still all together, we're still here for her and for each other. And I think she provided a lot of, in some ways, emotional support to her sister and her dad and I. Um, and even our dog too. We had our dog get out safe, and we had him with us the whole time. And so we really just kind of went into the same familiar mode we've been in before of hey, there's these big urgent issues to figure out. My husband and I were doing work in our podcast production business the very next day from our computers. We started looking around for first temporary places to live, and then long term, we had a lot of people reach out to support us that were really, really warm and kind and generous. And that was really interesting to me because I felt like all the 18 years that I've been an unpaid family caregiver, simply not bringing in income while I was providing all of this service to my daughter, and struggling with housing and struggling with meeting medical bills and struggling with uh, being in debt most of that time, because we certainly started out with very little at the very beginning. And the perception and reception that most people seem to have when I talk about those challenges are feel to me really, really dismissive and really uh I've had comments, so why did you have a child if you couldn't afford it and things like that. And
So I want you to know that I've lived that.
yeah,
Like that has been like our story. Like we had kids. You don't know that your kids are going to have special needs, and even if you did, like they're still worth like living. It's life is still worth living, and there's still joy. And not the point I'm trying to make, but
yeah,
like we got married and everything was fine, and then my husband became disabled, and like we have lived that life of like severe poverty for most of the last decade, and we're only like just barely on the other side of that, where my husband's finally like doing so much better than he ever has, and he's had this kind of miraculous recovery, and he just 2 or 3 months ago got this really great job he loves. But like it's been like living on SSI and student loans, like that's how we survived. And like I couldn't work because I was his caretaker and the 3 kids caretaker, and like literally everything would fall apart. Like I tried getting this part-time job once, and it just was like insane. Like my whole family like couldn't function.
You were
So, like,
already doing multiple jobs.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Multiple.
always. But like
If those 3 kids and the husband were needed to rely entirely on paid caregivers, that would be
I know.
several
So,
people's jobs, not
oh
just
yeah.
one.
Mhm.
That was definitely way more.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. And so like I absolutely feel where you're coming from. Like when you have the special needs kids to take care of, and you have all these because that's such a difficult, intricate, complicated thing. And then on top of that, you're adding like poverty. Poverty. I'm so passionate about it because it's been my lived experience for so long. Like it is an entire like new layer to this whole thing that is so difficult. And in some ways, like it can be a huge blessing. Like Medicaid has been
right.
incredible. Like there are things that have been really like a huge blessing in that, but like also like so hard. And to add that layer on, like special needs children require so much more. Like we can't just have like doors, a front door that locks. It didn't work. We have to have a special lock. And we've had locks on windows and locks on all sorts of things to keep my son safe. And like just constant like they break things more than the average child, and they need different and like therapeutic grade toys in some cases, and just like
Yeah.
specialty clothing and like all of the things. And when you are just totally broke on top of that, like the mom like guilt is so extreme, and it's a huge burden, and it just amplifies everything that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
So anyways, I feel where you're coming from, and and I totally understand all of the like the smug attitudes of kind of the rest of the world, where it's like, you should just be doing better. Like I don't know how you're not. You should just be
Well,
doing
I
better.
mean, if you add up 18 years of wages, even at minimum wage, and you're disregarding the potential or likelihood of job advancement over time, right? And what that could mean for a career. If you add up 18 years of minimum wage payments, that's way more than what we lost in the fire. And people have this huge heart and came out of the woodwork to like offer us things, and really, really sweet. And I appreciate it. And it's amazing. It was amazing to get to experience that. It was almost like a relief of like, oh, we're going through something and people do care. Wow. Wow. Yeah. And whereas all of the caregiving experiences, all of the needs that my daughter had that were really exceptional, and all of the ways that, yeah, the mom is the default and just expected, no matter how many people's jobs it actually adds up to, no matter what her condition is actually, or what her resources are, or her education or training, that mom's just default expected to do this for no money, is to me really, really has become so mind-boggling to me, like how that's the case.
And it's something
How,
like we have to talk about it more. This is something that the general public is so unaware of. And so like we have to talk about this more. We have to like help people become aware of like what's actually going on here, cuz it would blow your mind. And then we have to start changing it and valuing mothers for everything they do, which is not happening right now.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think that's super, super important. And I think that when you talk about finding sunshine in these situations, one of the things that kept me going and that brought me to a point now where I can say life feels good is is to really be able, at least from time to time, to step back and compare what am I accomplishing and what I'm doing, and really understand the magnitude of that, and really understand, give myself credit for, yes, I not only met the basic needs of two little young people that are young.
Which, by the way,
I
is like so hard. Like
is enough in itself.
early motherhood for like even typical kids is like so hard. Like
Right.
just on its own. And then to add in special needs, like just
Right. And then I also did X number attended X number of doctor's visits, that I did all of the coordination before and after for, dealt with the bills that came in improperly and the yada, 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 everything like that. And so, and doctor's visits and PT visits and OT and things we've talked about, and that daily medication management and daily preparation of meals for 9 years, right?
Ooh, and I want to add on one thing.
Yeah.
When your kids go to therapy, this is something like no one seems to realize. Your kids go to therapy, they teach you how to do that therapy at home, and you are in turn expected to be the therapist for your kids for all the rest of the time because they're only going to some of these therapies for like an hour a week.
Right.
And then they're like, okay, watch what we do. Here's parent training. You have to do all these things. Like, now you have to be implementing this, you know, every second of your day so that your kid can actually learn it because we're really just here to teach you. So, like, one of those
Right.
things that special needs moms have to become without any kind of choice in the matter is a therapist.
Right. Right. And we definitely, all of the all of the support that we do get, it tends to be consultation and training, right? It's not anyone else to share the number of hours and be there for the 41st through the, how many hours are there in a week? Through the end of the week, right? With us. It's not, we don't have that other people to rely on usually. The things that only things we usually do have, which can be very difficult to access, very expensive for us, we're supposed to come up with payment for, and uh very limited. We get access to these it's like consultants for us, right? And which is sometimes very important. I mean, I don't want to diminish that, obviously.
Yeah, one of the things I
It's
like to say is like there's a trial in every blessing and a blessing in every trial. And so it's like, yes, these therapies are amazing and they're so needed. And parent training is absolutely essential. But like let's just like open the book and look at how what an extra burden this is for mothers and how many roles we have to play.
right. And how many total hours are you expecting from one individual? um I like to keep in mind that 24/7 care is actually the equivalent of 4.2 full-time jobs.
Holy
So
cow.
if you are expecting one person to do 24/7 care, that's 4.2 jobs, regardless of whether it's paid or not. No, whole other issue. Regardless of whether that person has access to anything else they need, it's 4.2 jobs um,
Well,
for
and one
24/7
thing
care.
that's maybe worth looking at is like yes, that is expected of mothers of young kids. Like like of typical young kids. But then
Right.
those young kids need less and less and less like specified one-on-one 24-hour care the older they get. I mean, you they just kind of slowly age out of that. But when you have a special needs kid, they really like depending on the child, but they kind of don't, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that age of like, oh, they're 10, they can do they can cook on their own, they can go to the toilet on their own, they can do all these things because they're becoming independent humans. That independence is delayed by who knows how much.
Or never happens,
Or
depending on what
never.
the medical condition really is.
Yeah.
For sure and certain. And it's been my experience with seeking assistance in social services, and other caregivers than me, where this state likes to term everything as typical parenting expectations when it's so beyond what would normally typically be expected for an 8 or a 10 or 12-year-old or a 17-year-old to still require assistance toileting, to still require somebody with them in the bath, to still or not in the bath, but in the supervising them while they take the bath. And there's definitely a way that it's so often just willfully not seen as extra time that someone needs to spend. Regardless of how intense or not intense that time actually is, if it's needed, and it's definitely an opportunity cost for the person that does it, if you compare it to what else they would spend their time on. And I think that when you start to look at, I mean, even a 5-year-old kid compared to a newborn is
huge difference.
Typically needs a lot less. They're starting to be able to do some light chores, together with mom or by themselves. They're probably getting invited to play dates or having groups that they go to where mom's,
Or
if anything,
drop
sitting
them
to the
off,
side, chatting
right?
to their moms.
They're not on top of them every single second at any outing ever.
Right. Right. Even starting at, something like 5 years old, those things start to happen. And certainly by 17, which the state of Oregon allows parents to become paid as caregivers in the caregiving roles when the child turns 18. So from 5, 10 through 18, if you have a child like mine that still requires supervision at all times, cannot be left alone, I, as a parent, did not experience anything similar to what a lot of my friends did, where once the kids started to reach those ages, all of a sudden mom and dad can both go out together without needing to find a babysitter. And
or even like if they're younger, like, oh, I can just hire some 14-year-old neighbor to like come watch your kids. I was like, like, good luck even finding literally anybody at any cost who's willing to learn how to care for your kid. I mean, I have a severely autistic diabetic who you have to like inject with a needle multiple times a day and like to keep him alive. And like my family is like, that's too complicated. And most babysitters are like, yeah, I can't. Like, certainly not some little 14-year-old neighbor,
Yeah.
Like that respite, that babysitting and going out on a date, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And it is way different than the typical expectations. I definitely remember when my kids reached even that early school age, about 5, and my older one did to some extent experience the starting to separate more and more, and she'd have the friends invite her over. She'd have she wanted to do Girl Scouts and choir and different things where it was a drop off or mom's not involved necessarily other than driving, which we know a lot of people spend plenty of time driving kids between activities too. But more of that normal thing happened with my older one, that I started to watch a lot of friends of mine where all of their children were typically gain more and more of their independence back and need to do less and less things for their child. And that wasn't happening for me. And it was really frustrating and really
one of the things that always tears my heart open a little bit is when somebody says something like, oh, this time doesn't last. Enjoy them while they're young. They're gonna move out and you'll be an empty nester. And I'm like, actually, no. Actually, that's probably never, ever gonna happen. Like,
Yeah.
actually, no, they're not all gonna just, leave the nest. And, like, no, I will be caretaking for my entire life.
Yeah.
So, like, those little, like, cliche things that people say to try to make mothers feel better, like, it can be painful.
Actually, a lot of times that sort of comment would really hit me hard, and I'd feel so much more sad and devastated and like different than others because, no, like, especially the older my child got, when she got to be, like I said, even school age, but definitely by 10 and 12 and into the teen years, I, I just, I'm like, no, I'm already, this is way different than typical. She's not gaining that kind of independence from me. And I have no access to anyone else to start stepping in further, at that point. It well, it was about when my daughter was about 13, we got access to hiring outside caregivers through the Katie Beckett waiver, putting her on Medicaid and having home and community supports that way. And that was, still on me to find the people, to give the
Make sure they're
people,
trustworthy because you hear all the stories of people who are,
right,
not trustworthy, and that's so scary. And so you have to just like,
right. And to be the manager of the employees. And a lot of times that involves being physically there while they're there. And so it definitely is a far cry from the typical parenting expectations when you've got a 10 to 17-year-old and older. They're typically needing less and less from the parent. And really, by the time it's older teens, that's very little. My older daughter, who is typically developing, would, start to be out with friends, and I'd have to like nag her to let us know where she was and make phone calls to us, right? She takes great care of herself, and she's kind of always been very cautious by her nature. So it wasn't like I worried a lot about her or anything. I had kind of an easy teen mom experience that way. But my point being that she could be very, very independent, certainly in those later teen years, whereas the child with the disability cannot be left alone still as an almost 21-year-old.
and that independence, I feel like it's just something we don't talk about enough. Like how important it is for parents to watch their children become increasingly independent. Like,
Right.
sure, we talk about, oh, it's so sad they're leaving and like they became adults. And it's like, yes, that is sad, but also it's worse if it doesn't happen, right? You know?
It's a mixed bag. Yeah. Um, yeah. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Looked up at something and I lost my train of thought. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a mixed bag when the kids do gain that level of independence, but it also is the normal parenting expectation. And with children that have disabilities, I think it's a really willful not seeing of the work that moms do. And I think that we don't acknowledge and make it so that child, if not transition to fully their own independence, could transition away from the family in some way to where it could be relied upon, that they could have other people in their lives and mom and dad could have as much as possible, similar experience of more and more getting our own freedom back, being able to focus on things other than our child, so forth.
Absolutely. It's so essential as a human being to be able to pursue your own passions and to pursue your own, hobbies and dreams. And like you grow up and you go to school and you choose like a career and you choose like a direction in college, and then you have kids with special needs and it all disappears. And so much of motherhood, you just get swallowed up in the needs of your kids. And then in a typical kind of setting, like those early motherhood years are so hard, but then they fade. Like the
Yeah.
hardness fades out as the children grow older. But when you have special needs kids, that difficult time, that super intensive early motherhood like stress where they need you for every single thing, it doesn't fade.
Yeah.
It doesn't, they don't become more independent. They don't become easier for all the hands-on things. It honestly, it gets harder because the gap between their typical peers and them just gets wider and wider and wider. And it's like, sure, you have a 17-year-old, but you don't like really have a 17-year-old. Like it doesn't feel like that. It feels
It's
kind of
not,
like you still have a newborn, you know?
it's a very different experience for the parent for sure. And it's a very, mm, that ongoing need for care is not the ordinary parenting expectations.
Well, and like,
And it's really something that's ignored for the most part in terms of providing it. I know that I've run into people who consider themselves advocates for those with disabilities and are pretty powerful within my state, who philosophically don't believe in anybody other than the parent or the family having that default of care, having that on-call nature, having that bottom line, somebody's going to show up today, right? and and that is really, for me, the biggest part of the burden that I've experienced is that kind of opportunity cost, where I know if I make any other plan that doesn't involve my daughter, there's a pretty good chance I might need to call out from it.
so we talk
um
about like
yeah,
caregiver burnout. And
yeah,
that's kind of an expression that people are familiar with, right? Caregiver burnout. And we see every so often there's a story in the news where something like really horrific happens, and then all of a sudden it's like at the top of the of everyone's minds, like, oh, what do we do? How do we fix this? Like, pay attention the rest of the time. Like,
absolutely.
don't let it get to that level where
Ab-
like this woman, does a murder suicide of her like disabled child, and it's like this horrific shocking thing to the world, and then some of us are sitting here like she was pushed to that, like she was pushed there,
where was the care all that time before
right?
for
like
her?
like like this makes logical sense when you're pushed and you're pushed and you're pushed to the very edge of your limits over and over and over and over again. Like, of course somebody's going to actually go insane from this level of stress. Like, that's what cortisol does to your brain and to your body. It is severely damaging. So, if we want to stop these things from happening, we have to start caring before they happen. We have to
Yeah,
start caring about all the people who are dealing with this level of stress and burden and like super vigilance like every single second, and it's just invisible because we
for
don't
sure.
have the energy to yell and scream about it all the time because
What
we're so tired.
people love to show up in a crisis. People love to offer help and support short term when they see something happening as a crisis to
But
somebody who's otherwise stable.
when your life's always a crisis and you're like, this is crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis, it's sort of just like doesn't matter. Like it's not like really a crisis anymore, right?
Yeah, it's people definitely don't understand the same level of definitely don't have the same level of urgency and importance around ongoing needs such as we have with our kids. that maybe lower level, maybe they're not a big thing at any given moment, but that fact that I have to be there on call 24/7, and in fact, at least in my early years, in my experience, actually be there most of the time, drains and drains and drains and drains a person's resources and a family's resources over time, and accumulates to really much more of a bigger impact.
Well, one thing I want to...
I'm hearing my other appointment come in
Oh,
the door,
that's
and
all
I've
right.
got to get going. Yeah.
No worries. Before we head off, can you just tell us the name? You don't have your podcast out yet, right?
It is in development.
Okay,
Yes.
What's it called? So I can get it in the show notes and everyone can go look for it.
Awesome. Thank you. It's called Love Doesn't Pay the Bills.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I have loved hearing your story and your perspective. I'm very passionate about all of this whole topic. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much. You have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming on, Lisa. I absolutely loved hearing that perspective and having the chance to talk to somebody else about what it's like to be a caregiver and to be on call and like have that hypervigilance that's essential 24/7. It was lovely to get to talk to Lisa and to hear her story and her perspective. So here are my very favorite takeaways from this episode. Number 1, it's about persistence and being willing to put one foot in front of the other and seeking whatever you can do. Number 2, the sunshine is in pushing forward because there is hope. There is the promise of a better tomorrow, even though today is awful. Number 3, in order to be there for your kids, you have to be there for yourself. Number 4, I am worthy of being comfortable. I am stronger when I am comfortable. Number 5, it's all about give and take, but you have to recognize when you're just giving and giving and giving. It's important to know what you need and give it to yourself. Number 6, learn to pick and choose and prioritize. Don't feel the need to do everything. Number 7, 24/7 care is the equivalent of 4.2 full-time jobs. This blew my mind. And lastly, number 8, how do we fix caregiver burnout? We pay attention the rest of the time. Don't let it get to that level before we do something about it. I hope you guys have just an incredible day today. And I am so thankful that you are here listening to my podcast. Please go sign up on my website and get emails from me. And I'm going to leave you with a song. Bye.
You're also the worst. You are my child and I love you through and through. But you push my buttons. You do, you do, you do, you do, you do. You shake up my life. You let me know I'm alive. No matter what I do, you always just didn't pull through. Life held on by a single thread. After all that I could do, your energy and that wild side make my days insane. Now I know just what it's worth to escape that loss and pain.
You know I would do anything for you, 'cause you are my heart and soul. But boy, you drive me crazy.
You are a blessing. You are a curse. You are the best, but you're also the worst. You shake up my life, you let me know I'm